first step that we're going to do on the cuffs is we're going to press the interfacing to the wrong side. So what we want to make sure is that you've clearly identified the right side versus the wrong side. The right sides are the sides that are facing each other when you cut out the cuff. So that this would be one wrong side and this would be the other wrong side. And what we're going to do is we're going to place the interfacing on the wrong side. The first step is to just press the cuff. And then the second step will be to lay the interfacing on top of the cuff and press it with a dry iron. The interfacing is half the width of the cuff plus a ½ inch. Okay? After you've fused the interfacing, what you're going to do is you're going to crisply fold the cuff in half and iron it so it's folded precisely in half. And that's wrong sides together. What we're going to do is we're going to finish one end of the cuff. So you're going to put right sides together. You're going to put right sides together and you're going to finish one end. So we're going to sew it. It's a ½ inch seam allowance. You're going to start at the halfway point and we're going to sew down ½ inch along one side. Okay? So exactly at a ½ inch, you're going to take a few stitches, reverse, and so slowly and carefully, right to the edge, okay? It's important that you get right to the edge. You're going to angle the corner and you're going to trim your seam allowances down to 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. You're just trimming until the ½ inch, okay? After you do that, you're going to flip it to the right side. Using a pointer, you're going to push out the corner, and I'm going to carefully press this edge, okay? I'm going to pin the cuff, the uninterfaced side of the cuff, to the wrong side of the sleeve. Because what we're going to, okay? So line up your ends, pin along. These should match flush. There's no ease or anything in this. This is somewhere where you could baste, particularly if you have a yarn dye, because you want to make sure you're getting it right on a line, okay? Making sure your underarm seam is pressed towards the back. And as you come around, you should have approximately a ½ inch left for the seam allowance, okay? And remember, one side should have the bias flat, one side should have it folded back, okay? After you've pinned it all the way around, we're now going to sew it. And the easiest way to sew this is to tuck the cuff into the sleeve, tuck the whole cuff into the sleeve, sew from one edge to the other, okay? I want to sew precisely at a ½ inch. So lining it up at a ½ inch. I'm going to sew a few stitches, reverse, and sew slowly and carefully to the other end. And I like to do it from cuff side up so that I could see the precise line that I'm sewing along. If you don't have a pattern, like a yarn die like this, you could draw a line. To the end of the sleeve, reverse, and clip your threads. Okay? Now before you trim or cut anything, you want to make sure that you've attached it properly. So let's take a look. So here's my seam allowance all the way along, correct? And if I was to flip this cuff out, so the next step that I could do is trim the seam allowance slightly. You could go back and trim the seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch. And so this is what it looks like so far. So what I'm going to have to do is fold this in, correct, and top stitch it along the top. But the first thing I need to do is finish the other end, which is still open. Using our fold line as a guide, I'm going to fold it back and put right sides together, correct? This is the other end of the sleeve, and I'm going to sew my 1/2 inch. So I'm going to be sewing right along here, my seam allowance, okay? You're going to take a few stitches, reverse, and sew straight down and reverse. Clip your threads and repeat the same process as you did on the other side, which is to angle the corner and trim the seam allowance. Always be cautious about how much you cut before, okay? So let me see if I can flip this and if I like the shape of the corner that I get. Push out your corner. It's fine. I'm going to press it. And then the last step will be this, is to press under the front, the top of the sleeve, the top of the cuff, the part that's interfacing. I'm going to pre-press it under a 1/2 inch so that I can top stitch it. And I'm going to be top stitching around all 4 sides, okay? On the top of the cuff, I'm going to edge stitch, which means I'm going to sew very close. So sewing the cuff, you can start anywhere. It doesn't really matter where you start sewing. But just remember, on 3 sides, you're going to be top stitching, and on the 4th side at the top, you're going to be edge stitching. Okay, so sew slowly and carefully down. When you get to what you think is about 1/8 of an inch away, leave the needle in and pivot. When you get to the corner again, when you're about 1/8 of an inch, and you can play with a stitch a little bit by jiggling the reverse. And now I'm coming to the top where I want to edge stitch it, and that is 1/16 of an inch away. So come very close to the edge, and I'm going to sew straight across. And when you come to the end, reverse a few stitches. And you're done. Okay, so all 4 sides have been sewn, and then you can take out your basting stitch. Okay, so that's the whole cuff. The front of the cuff goes over the back of the cuff. Okay?